is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution. Radio.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Oh. Good afternoon. This is Debbie West on Lost Knowledge Radio Show, and I have my co-host Michael Hathaway on. Michael, hello.
Hello, Debbie.
So, Michael, we have a really exciting show today. We have as our guest a man named Thom Reed, and I know you've been doing a little research on his case. His experiences with entities not of the earth, we're going to call it, has been highly documented and classified as a CE4, which is a close encounter of the fourth kind, which means there's physical evidence and evidence of real contact. His case is actually being presented, was presented to the United Nations, and is one of very few cases that of contact, off-world contact, that was presented at the UN. He has been on every news show that you can imagine. Fox Morning News. He's been on the Discovery Channel. He's been in the Chicago Tribune. He's in Knoxville, Tennessee, is where he lives now. But he's also got there's a new History Channel show called Uncovering Aliens. He's been on Mysterious World TV. The list goes on. And I think that after having talked to him for a while today, the reason people are so interested in hearing his story is that he is a very humble man. He doesn't have any interest in promoting this event other than for what it actually was, which is a childhood and a generational experience with contact that gives us with certainty the reality that we are not alone on the earth. So what did you get from the research that you did on the Thomas Reed case, Michael?
Well, I find it fascinating, particularly where a lot of it took place in the New England region, and it seems to be about that time frame that there was a lot of contact taking place back. I'm talking about his time back in the 60s. And so it just may connect some dots for me and some of the things that I've seen or heard of otherwise, and it's just fascinating.
So so basically the Thomas Reed case is what's really interesting about it is that it talks about what was recounted later as alien encounters with two young boys, two young brothers, Matthew and Thomas, who had really no knowledge of what this could have been at the time, and had memories that were in sync with one another, and grew up with the understanding that there was something that they weren't quite sure what it was that was happening to them. And as they grew up and the contact experiences, did continue, his mother and grandmother were involved in another experience in their car, and they realized that there definitely was a phenomenon going on that was multidimensional. The beings were presenting themselves in lowering a frequency and appearing in our density virtually out of nowhere. So this reminds us, he describes it as an orb of energy and a bright light that appeared in his room. And this reminds us of the information that Andrew Collins describes in his book Light Quest, because he describes in great detail these energy beings that we can call orbs, but they are energetic beings of a higher dimension that can manifest in our 3D reality here on Earth, and something that we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, that seems to be, and I know a lot of people that even in photography are getting orbs around, and there seem to be people that attract the orbs. In other words, there are certain people that they seem to appear more to when you're taking photographs than others. So I wonder if there's a connection, a correlation to all of this.
Yeah, so the orbs are actually in the tunnels in Bosnia. Sam has talked about them quite a bit, and we've tried to, this year we're trying to do some investigations there in the tunnels with the orbs that have been photographed frequently. When Eric von Daniken was in the tunnels with Sam, the pictures of the orbs are everywhere. I mean, he's been a pioneer in helping us to investigate our origins and, the interaction with all these other species on the planet over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. And so I think, like you said, they were attracted to him knowing that he was on a quest for nothing more than uncovering the truth and bringing that knowledge out, that lost knowledge, so that we can continue our evolution here on the planet as a species. So there's a lot of work into trying to communicate with these beings, establishing a platform where we can go to their level as opposed to them having to come down to ours, which means that we can, raise our vibration and maybe project ourselves into this fifth dimensional reality that is different than what we operate in here. It's just a different frequency. So I think it's exciting because I think this is the year where we're going to cross over some boundaries, where we're going to really push through into some really concrete knowings that are probably already there, but we just haven't really been able to break through the barrier. And as the veil thins on the Earth plane and all these realities start to manifest, we're going to all experience them and jointly, sort of as a unified group, go like, wow, aha.
Well, Thomas may just have a couple of those little pieces in his interview today begin to connect those dots a little more for us as we search for that lost knowledge.
Yep. So we're going to have him on in a few minutes. He's really been tied up a lot and busy, and I was hoping to have him on for the full 2 hours today. But what we're going to do is a short segment today, about a half hour with Thomas, and then we're going to do a follow-up with him in March that will talk in great detail about how he sees the world now. His family, again, his father is a prominent politician growing up in New England. The day that the case was presented to the UN, his father died under somewhat mysterious circumstances. And there's been really his story is one of great vast information of knowledge that can help us understand this phenomenon. But also, it's also been exposed a lot in the media, and he's been talking to me a little bit about some of the cases where the media has really not been sensitive to the fact that this is a family. These are young children, and they have children now of their own. They're part of our society, and they're affected by all of this. His courage to come out and tell this story and to tell about his experiences and to try to make people have an understanding and a connection to the cosmos in a very real way has put him in a position where, it can create, people can create a lot of misunderstanding. And I think, Michael, you've talked to a lot of people and done a lot of regressions, and people are afraid to come out and talk about their experiences, with aliens or with extraterrestrials or off-world beings or whatever you might want to call it, because they're afraid of what what people might say, right?
Well, I remember one of the first abduction experiences that I worked with probably some 20 years ago, and the person was so nervous that under what we call normal hypnosis wasn't acceptable. They had to sit facing me with their eyes wide open. In other words, to just talk about it. And as we went back and investigated, we did find that this was something that started early on in childhood and was in a home where probably it had been going on for other generations too.
Right. And I think that for me, like after having talked to so many people over the last 3 years that have embraced their connection to other beings, that the fear and that their fear level, the emotional body where they're experiencing their fear, has been diminished or eliminated almost completely. And I think that when you resonate at this higher frequency and connect with your true aspect of self that operates at a higher dimension, that you can remember your soul connection to the experience. You can remember the contract that you made that connected your path as you're journeying here in your avatar body on Earth, the experience that you're agreed to, that you have a pre-agreement with, and that can eliminate that emotional fear that comes up for you as a human, not understanding or not remembering and having a knee-jerk reaction, thinking that this is something that wasn't part of your original plan. And that's how Kathleen Marden explained it to me when we talked, who has done so much research, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, during that session, that abduction, we don't want to call it abduction, but during that experience that they had, they did not recognize or understand what was happening. And Kathleen's thousands and thousands of interviews with other people who experiencers now helped her to understand that they eventually came to realize that this contact was positive, that the beings were here to help, that they are not trying to harm anybody, that there's not an alien agenda that would have anything to do with harming the human race or manipulating the human race. They're evolving on the planet as beings, sentient beings, just like we are. And she told me quite clearly that her understanding after all this research and being the niece of the Hills and being involved very closely and being there during the episodes being recounted and FBI investigations and everything else that went on, that her conclusion, her intuitive conclusion was that this was a program that was designed to upgrade and activate a new DNA that will bring us to a higher space, a higher, more evolved frequency, so that we can enter into this galactic age with the knowing and the trusting and discernment that we are the sovereign beings controlling this planet Earth, that we have a lot of neighbors, a lot of participants in this, that we have never been alone, and that whole awakening process. So I think that hearing that from people that are connected to these cases helps make it more real, don't you think?
Yes, I do. I think that once they realize that perhaps they're a part of something very special rather than fear, and realize that the knowledge, the information, perhaps the new neural pathways that have been developed in their brain because of their experiences give them insights that can help guide others as they go through similar experiences.
Yeah, so I think that we're on the path now as a human race and as investigators in all of this phenomenon that we can now stop our, I guess it would be hard to put it in a nice way, but we need to stop sort of attacking the messengers and start taking their messages seriously, because what have they communicated to us? There has been absolutely no evidence that for the most part the contact has been anything but uplifting. All of the messages that we've gotten from the Syrians, the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, even the Greys, even the Anunnakis, there hasn't been a race that I have talked to with their human connection or people that have had these contacts that has expressed anything except for uplifting to humanity. We need to be peaceful. We need to take control of this planet so that it becomes our home and is a safe place for all of us to evolve. That we need to know ourselves, understand that we're soul carriers, understand that we're immortal beings, understand our divine nature. Those are the messages that are coming through. And this is the same message that Thomas Reed got. And that's his takeaway from the experience. This is what Judy Carroll was talking about when we talked to her about the Greys. What do the Greys want to tell us? Well, the Greys want to tell us that we are the beings, the stewards of the planet Earth, but we're not alone. There are many beings. There are many entities, if you want to call them that all evolve together around this area of the Milky Way, around this planet and on this planet, within this planet, and in many dimensions that participate in the planet. So when you have a broader perspective, you can start to understand that, our actions resonate out into different parts of the galaxy because we're sending our energy. What energy are we sending, Michael? We need to understand energy in a new way.
I agree. Your words are so fascinating, Deb. I listen to every one of what you're saying, and the fascinating thing, even in your statement you just made when you said, when I'm talking to these different races. And I thought that was just a wonderful little slip of what's happening in your unconscious mind when you bring the information in. You certainly have a way of knowing something beyond this earth, just as many of these other folks do.
Well, I think that the time of, discernment is over. I think that the time of distraction should stop. I think that we need to embrace and acknowledge our heritage and move into this new age of enlightenment. And I think that's what our show is going to be about this year. We've got a lineup that includes a couple of the most famous cases of contact with other entities. The one that we're going to talk about today with Thomas Reed, and then the adjacent affair, where the people are still around to tell their story. And unfortunately, the Hills, with the exception of Kathleen Martin, who's here as a representative of the family, many of the cases don't have a representative still here to talk about, but these two cases do, and we'll be talking to them. I'm just going to go over the lineup for a second because I think it's important for people to understand what we have going on here on the show, because it's going to be indicative of the direction that we're going to go in. So we're going to talk to Artie Six Killer Clark, and she's got new evidence of the sky people from all over North America and South America, and she's been investigating, and that's been her path, is to connect with those energies and to bring that information to us. We're going to talk to a representative from Agartha, from the fifth dimension, people that have traveled who have been on the ascension journey already and have already made the connection with the Lemurian through the portal, through different portals, the one in Minnesota and also the one in Mount Shasta. And we're going to be able to understand a little bit more about that path to communicate with off-world beings. We also are going to talk to some light workers who have put together a manual for us to understand frequency and light in a new way, how we can connect to our own source of light in a stronger way and connect to this higher frequency so that we can bring truth and beauty into our lives. Light is the most powerful tool we have. It's the most powerful tool we have, and we have a new access to it. So this information on light is going to be very important. We're going to talk to somebody who's going to share with us how to travel multidimensionally. She has a book out, Karika, a young girl who's written a book about how to experience multidimensional travel. And many of the young ones already know how to do this. Some of us are being retrained. It'll be fun to hear from her about firsthand how we actually can travel into other dimensions safely using all of her knowledge. So, and then we're also going to talk to Stephanie South about the law of time, how time is not linear. Time is not of the third dimensional Earth the way we had originally thought. Just like the material that we've been presented from the law of one, space-time is quite different. We start to understand that in our science now. So that's kind of our lineup, Michael. I'm hoping to get Lee Carroll on, who's going to be in Austin in February, March. So we're hoping to talk to Chiron and Lee Carroll a little bit about the new children, the new Earth, and the fifth root race that's manifesting here on the planet, and kind of following up with him. He's written probably 13 different books about that, and want to hear about his latest news. We've got a lot of different reports coming in from basically all over the world. So just a quick update, but it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really exciting.
It's exciting to be on the cutting edge, isn't it?
Well, the idea is that we're going to, bridge the gap so that there's a platform for people who have this connection to the cosmic cultures. And they need to have a voice. They really need to be heard. They need to be heard without judgment and, without having to spend all their time trying to credentialize themselves and, proof of their existence, lie detector tests. I mean, poor Thomas Reed has been through what we consider our scientific evidence that proves that his story is true. And anybody that's ever reported contact goes through all of this. It's the trying to find physical evidence, trying to, basically disprove him or debunk him before you can actually come around and say, well, what did this experience mean to you, and what did these cultures have to tell you? What can we learn from this? So we're gonna step away from all of that, the people who are trying to debunk, and we're gonna actually listen. We're gonna open up communication between us and any cosmic cultures, just like we have been doing over the last year, so that they have an opportunity to really, truly express themselves.
And isn't it interesting? His experience, I believe, was in '66, which is almost 50 years ago. Now, the interesting thing to me is that at that same time, as I had moved here to the Mount Washington Valley in New Hampshire, there was a whole series of contacts that were taking place in this area with eyewitness reports, even evidence of some metal being left at a place that people claimed where there was a landing. And this is all going on about the same time. So Thomas's story, again, has a special resonance for me because it does connect back to a time when similar experiences were going on. And I know people that the effect of what they experienced in that time is still affecting them in their life today.
Yeah, and actually he goes through that. You can find a lot of research into the fact that all of this contact was being done over this same time period. John Mack was interviewing and recording it and doing a lot of registering of the information. MUFON was very active during this time period. What we call the program, or what I call the program of upgrade, was in full swing during those years. The program has been completed. It is successful. We have a hybrid species on the planet that is manifesting amazing traits. They have remote viewing capabilities. They are telepathic. They're completely rewired. This phenomenon was not, fun and games from a group of aliens that wanted to play with the human race. It was a specific program designed to re-engineer, redesign, genetically modify, and upgrade a species that is extremely barbaric, self-serving, and isn't ready to join the Galactic Federation. And it is designed to help promote the possibility of that happening in the next 50 years.
Can you explain what the Galactic Federation is?
I would love to, Michael, but we got to get Thomas on air. He's standing by, so we are going to hold on here. Let me get him a minute. I think I've got him ready to go. Hold on one second. Oh boy. Okay. Can you talk for a minute about some of the cases that you've seen where people come in? I think you've got some there that have given you some pretty good examples of their own experiences.
Well, as I mentioned before, there seems to be a hotbed of sightings that have been taking place here in the New England area for 50 to 60 years. I know in talking with people, and that I have a weekly metaphysical discussion group, and talking to people that come in the door sometimes that are drawn there. They may be there just once, something brings them. And the stories they tell are pretty amazing. One particular story took place up in northern New Hampshire, and it was a young couple who were taking a ride at night, and all of a sudden, as they got to this point, they saw a ship in the sky above them, and it kind of freaked them out, and they turned around and raced back to their place for security in the town. And whatever happened that night, the couple went their own ways afterwards, and they both lived in almost fear. You could see just in telling the story about that encounter that it was something that was really pretty scary to them. I know a woman in the Conway area that had an experience at about this time in the mid to late 60s, and she, as a child, had been outside and seen this.
Hi, I'm sorry, Michael, to interrupt. Hi, Thomas. This is Debbie West. We're on air on Lost Knowledge Radio.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I have a little echo on your end. Are you listening to the show right now?
No, I'm not.
All right, hold on one second.
Yeah,
okay.
You've got it. Hi, Thomas. This is Michael Hathaway up in New Hampshire.
Hi, Mike.
Okay, that's better. So Michael Hathaway's on the line. Like I said, he is an author and a regression therapist that lives in New Hampshire in the White Mountains. And Thomas, we've been introducing you and your case a little bit and talking a little bit about how we want to have more open and truthful dialogue with our cosmic cultures and try to take away some valuable information from the experiences that have been documented over the years. And I know that your case was presented at the UN Why do you think the UN is so interested in the case? Are they finally going to acknowledge that cosmic cultures are going to be part of our new reality?
Well, I think they were interested in the subject a long time ago, and I think that was probably fueled, and from what I've seen and what my father had showed me, as well as Robert Bletchman, who actually organized the symposium, that there's been proof that we're not alone. And although you'll hear a lot that that the government doesn't know this or there's no proof, of course there is, and I've got it in black and white, and it's been around since the 40s, 50s, and the paperwork that I have, a lot of it's from 1978. And so with that said, when our case was actually mentioned, it was really mentioned on the back side of Cash Landerman actually was where our case went in support of, only because of the magnetic fields and our feelings and thought on the environment and how the area around us was affected. And being that my father actually, had done 2 terms in office, it was his, pillar standing that at the time was so crucial to making a point, with the powers to be. If you don't come in strong with a lot of, credentials, then, you're kind of going in, with a unfair advantage, because the credibility of the people, I think, is what has really been hard, I think, when there's so many stones being thrown just because you've had an experience or because of something that someone else may not realize or pick up on or be able to accept. There's always that rolling of the eyes and that kind of thing. So, credentials and being able to deliver something in a way that others will maybe give it a little extra, time or make it more palatable, I think, is what was so important. Now, when our case went to the UN too, it went in support of 33.426, which had already been looked at, or this was a second attempt to get 33.426 revisited. And that was really the first attempt for disclosure, as far as I'm concerned, because it included all the other countries to be able to pool all their information. And if you saw this information from, Mexico and Greece and all this stuff, and you put it all in front of you, it's undeniable. But for some reason, it's just never happened. And no one's really been able to share that or want to share it. And it's just... So
did you get the impression that Russia, China, India, like you say, countries in South America, all have, England, they all have these UFO files and contact experience and have understanding that, yes, there is definitely, we do have off-world contact, there are, extraterrestrials amongst us.
Absolutely. So what I saw in black and white came from Greece, the Greece Ministry of Defense, the Pentagon, of course, Mohammed Ramadan, who was the head of the Parapsychology Society with the United Nations at the time in 1992, and I also saw some papers from Mexico. Now, aside from that, that's all I saw, but it's undeniable. I'll be happy to forward a couple of them to you. I mean, it's in black and white, and I just don't get it. I don't understand why there's not a little bit more interest in this subject, because I also think this goes a lot further than just the linear life that we live today. I mean, there's so many things that I've experienced and that my son has experienced, that this stuff this ability that he has and the feelings that we have and the ability to kind of, I hate to say this, but it's almost like my son can see like an hour in the future sometimes. He sees things before they happen. There was an accident that took place on our property. I wasn't even aware of it. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Just to give you an idea, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I know I don't have a lot.
Yeah.
But my son was actually at his girlfriend's, which is about an hour from our home, and this was about a year ago. And he calls me at about 2 o'clock in the morning and asked me if I was okay. And of course, I was fine. I was home. I was watching a little TV. I was getting ready to turn in. And he was actually in a panic. And he actually left, even after I assured him everything was fine, and drove an hour and got to my house around 3 o'clock in the morning. And as he turned into just before my driveway, there was an SUV that was upside down with a woman that had been partially hanging out of a sunroof because it had rolled. And it was on our property. And somehow he picked up on maybe the death that would soon be or the trauma related to his home. I don't know if it was me or the home, but that was not the first time he had done that. He had actually,
right, and you said after the experiences, you can sense energy around you, and things like that. So you're kind of like rewired into maybe a higher frequency of
yeah, and
energy.
I don't talk about that much. And the reason I don't is because our case is so intertwined. There's such a web around it that I try to stay to a certain subject, and because if not, I'm all over the place, and there's so many things I want to say, but I'm glad I'm on your show today because that is something I do not talk about very often, and that's true. There has been a lot of an intellectual and a preceding type of ability that my son primarily has, and just with sense, and to give you one more, I'll share one more thing with you before I go touch on that. When he was very young, he used to have a lot of these nosebleeds, and I'd say he was about 5 years old, and I was alone that night. He came into my bedroom, and he had blood on his sinuses, his lip and everything, and I was like, wow, what happened? Fall off the bed, or because it had happened before, but I didn't tie the two together with these weird nosebleeds that he had since he was very young, but there was a big space in between when he didn't have them anymore. And that night, with this nosebleed in my bedroom, said that the boat that I had in Florida was gone, and that there was what looked like a white Toyota. He described something that resembled a little older white Toyota with no hubcaps on it, was about to do some harm. He was scared of it, and at the time, I really wasn't sure what to make of it, and so and the only weird thing about that, too, is that I actually had noticed back then, and I know that people used to talk about this, but there was times when, like, street lights would go out and stuff, and he would be mad and things. And so we're in the bedroom now, and I'm putting him to bed, and I'm kind of listening to him a little bit and get some sleep. But at the same time, I could see how scared he really was, and I didn't know if it was a dream that he had And sure enough, about 2 weeks later, we're standing on the front porch of the house, and there's this car that goes by that I had never seen in the community before. And my neighbor, Nancy, who shared a property line, had been broken into through the side door, which faced his sliding door to his bedroom, just days or so prior, and it was those people that ended up getting arrested for it. And on top of that, I had sold the boat a few days earlier to his football coach.
Right, so he was seeing some sort of version of a reality that wasn't in 3D linear time, perhaps.
I know, and it's so baffling to me because, I have looked into souls and spirits, and I know that they have a weight to them. There's actually, I think, from what I've seen or read and been told by friends and those that work in the hospital, is that if you weigh someone a few hours before they die and again weigh them again afterwards, it has been shown that there's about a 2 to 2.5 pound difference between a person. So your soul and spirit, I think, has a weight to it. Now, I can't attest to that. I've only, from
Thomas, if I can interject one thing here.
Sure.
We all have 5 different senses. What you're telling me, I've heard from many people that have had like a near-death experience or something that shifted. It's like a new neural pathway opens up in the brain, and you or your son have received, it's like you're looking at the world differently, and you have that ability to step out in time.
I really believe that, and I believe that for a number of reasons, all right? I'm a big believer in electromagnetic fields and ELF, because I think that what happened with us and what Robert Blechman took to be so important with our case way back in the 90s and 80s when he reinvestigated our case and took it to the UN was that we really believed that what we felt was electromagnetic field around us, and why the crickets erupted and the cadids, and at the same time you hear about it all the time, the electromagnetic fields in the cars help them, are partially responsible, I guess, for having them stall. And at that time, with this ELF, there wasn't a lot of talk about it, but we were in a funk. We were in this engaging feeling and almost like a calm, like a dead calm. And after reading more and researching more, I find that, the neurons in your brain, they're impacted by ELF. And I saw some studies done where they took two individuals and put them in different parts of a building that was protected by lead, I guess. And they were able to stimulate each brain with the same frequency, and they could actually flip a flashlight, and the other one would flinch, and that sort of thing. And that's been proven to be able, that humans can do that. It's just a matter of being able to get yourself in a position and being able to have that ability to control it yourself to be able to do that. So it's been proven that we can do it. It's just, I guess, with most of us, it's just shut off, and it's a select few that I think that are having these abilities just are at a heightened level. And why that is, I think that there is some changes being made in some of our DNA that is allowing us to slowly become maybe the people that we were really meant to be. We're pretty barbaric by nature. I mean, you hear all the time that it's not enough to succeed, others must fail. And I think that's a perfect example of the mentality that we have as a race. Where is our love for each other? Where is our, is this the way it's going to be from now on? Are we going to continue to be, or would I, nearly an Neanderthal in the way that we feel and think and believe, or are we going to advance and be the people that we were meant to be? I think that the O negative or the Rh negative factor is a perfect example of the baseline that was originally man, and I think that's probably part of the reason that we have been or have the interaction or the encounters we had, because I think there's something in our DNA that was of interest, and whether there's a lot of us left, I don't know. Is it the O negative? I'm O negative. My son is A negative. My brother's A negative. We're not all O negative, but we all have the Rh negative factor. And maybe that's a baseline for what is needed to move forward. I don't know. But there's definitely something here.
Yeah. So Thomas, based on this contact experience that you've had, what do you think that the races are trying to communicate to you as an individual and maybe to society in general? Were they actually communicating with you, or do you think that you were just being brought into a program, like you say, to upgrade the species?
I think it was just part of a program. I know that's probably boring, but
it's not boring. It's anything but boring.
Yeah.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks. I do remember having a knowing, and I've mentioned this, but like an all-knowing, that this was this was something medical, that this was something we were in need. There was something that we had the feeling come over us, my brother and I, and maybe it was to keep us from being nervous or scared, because we did come in and out of this funk. It was like we were in a craft. We were in a building. We were in a facility that we had never seen before, totally something different. I mean, we were in this building. I mean, we were in this room. And I was scared. I kept looking over my shoulder for my brother because there was a comfort with him there. And when he and I were separated, he had a little tugboat, a blue and yellow tugboat that he had with him, and it actually came back with him. And his leg was in a brace. He had a club foot at the time. And I don't know if he was separated because of that. He remembers something a little bit different, but we remember at the same night that something was medical, something was important to us, something was important to them, that we were important. Now, whether that was fed to us telepathically, maybe I keep saying to myself, well, maybe I wanted to feel that way because what we went through seemed very scary, even though I don't think it was meant to be that way. I think maybe it's something very special. It's all.
Yeah, I mean, of all the 8 billion people on the planet, why you? So you were special. You were chosen for a reason, and
I'd like to
selected.
Think, sure.
Yeah.
Rather than
not random. It was by design, and perhaps you even at the soul level made a contract to participate in this program. Upon incarnation here on this planet.
Well, I would certainly like to believe that. I mean, I am leaning in that direction. We knew it was medical, and I can't say for sure that I remember something being said to us telepathically, but when you have a moment or a time 40 years ago and you still remember how you felt and strongly feel that you remember this or heard it, it had to have been some type of a telepathic type of communication to us, even though I say usually no, because I can't say for sure. But for my brother and I both to come away from that and both know that we contributed to something medical and something larger than what we could comprehend at that time, I have to say it was telepathic. And I think that we did take part in something that might benefit us in the future. And if I go that route, then the cards do seem to line up. You look at what happened with my brother in Brownsburg, which really refueled everything because there was so much attention around that because it did leave magnetic fields and there were some what they called radiation or hotspots, radioactive hotspots on the car, and there was a lot of proof to that one, and that Robert Bigelow funded team actually were 40 miles down the road looking at something else from that same evening, and so that got a lot of attention, and that's how Fox got involved, and our case kind of got reintroduced, but there was some tangible supporting documentation to this, and even that time, my brother got hit so hard with this ELF that he had blood coming from his nose. So you look at my son had it, my brother had it, and this happened when his son was turning the same age, 5 years old, that this happened to him and I as children. Not the exact same age, but I mean it was between, he was 4 and 5 and I was 7 and 9 when this took place. So it was around, our children were very young. And he had the bloody nose. My son was born in Fort Myers, Florida. And he was a crib, and my wife and I were in the other room. It was, I don't know what time it was late, and we both woke up at the same time having a very similar dream. And we looked at each other, and we didn't even say anything. And we both darted out of that bedroom, ran across the living room, and the rocking chair in our room was rocking, and cabinet doors in our kitchen were open, and my son was face down in the crib at 1 month old, maybe 1 to 2 months old, face down with, again, blood coming out of his nose. He was too weak to turn himself over. There's no way he could have turned himself over. So we wake up having the same dream with a rocking chair moving and my son face down. And I'll tell you one more thing. He was a quarterback that was he was scouted by the Georgia Bulldogs. He was a starting quarterback here in Florida. I'm sorry, in Florida and the Orange Bowl Youth League, but also here in Tennessee where we live when he got older in high school. And he would get hit or be, get overly worked up and his nose would bleed. So we took him into the emergency room and they did an x-ray on his sinuses. He has a hole in his sinuses that goes up into his sinus cavity. And they've never been able to give us a clear explanation as to why. It's a tiny little hole in what happens and why he has these nosebleeds for whatever reason. When he gets excited or he has he can being very calm to very, he feels what he sees and thinks. He gets in touch with it. And when he does, his nose bleeds. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do you have this hole up in your sinus cavity? Why has this been happening? Why is it when you have these nosebleeds that you have epiphanies? What is the connection between your state of mind and the way your body reacts to your thoughts and your feelings about things that are usually related to danger? And why in football, he would know he's going to be hit, but he'd see it, he kind of felt it before it happened. I know this isn't a really good example, but if you look at a quarterback, just to give you an idea, you got people running up behind you. Some people never hear them coming. Some people never feel it coming, and they get hit. He would always seem to know. He would move right, that kind of thing. He was always a step ahead. And if you look at the testing that was done with him in Palm Beach County in Crystal Lake Elementary School in Boynton Beach, Florida, he was testing off the charts. I mean, he tested in the superior range, way above gifted. He represented the school in mathematical calculations. He was doing grade 13 math with first year of college when he was in 5th grade. He's been able to do numbers, calculations, and formulas that are mind-blowing. Now, I like to think that I'm a fairly educated person, but I don't have, and people say, well, he's a smart kid. No, it's not that he's smart. He's extremely intuitive. And, we were actually in Lexington, Kentucky at Scarefest. Travis Walton was there, and Elvira and a few other people. And they actually tested him at Scarefest. And again, he tested well over 30-something% doing Zeta cards, and the average is 16. So there is something tangibly supported with the sensory that he has towards things. He was tested at the facility here in Knoxville, where he tested higher than coincidental chance, which is how he got his nickname Chance.
So then it would make sense that whatever program you were in, you and your brother, that the upgrade was passed on through your genetics to your own children. That's
where I'm going. I have, sometimes, you just have to say, yeah, that has to be where it came from, because there isn't anyone else in our family that can do this. Yeah, sure, I think, I would like to hear that song on the radio, and boom, it comes on, but that's a totally different thing. I don't sit in bed and go, wow, something's wrong with... He's kind of like if you have twins, because your brains work on the same frequency. You feel what your twin is feeling, or something happens to your twin, and you get wow, you feel it, you get a chill or a tingle down your arms. You're like, something happened, and you immediately want to call that twin. I had friends that were twins. He acts like that sporadically with individuals at certain times in certain situations. It's almost like he's connected, and at times I think that has to do again with what I've been looking into and taking more of an interest in, which is the plane that certain individuals can now communicate on. Mm-hmm. It seems to be happening more and more. You're hearing about it more and more. It doesn't mean it's happening. It could have been happening a lot in the past, but maybe individuals were not. Well,
what's actually funny, Thomas, is that this time in history has been prophesized forever. Edgar Cayce, Nostradamus, the Hopi, the Mayans, everybody was prophesizing the evolution of a new species, the fifth root race, the more evolved human. And it's not coming around to fruition the way we thought it would, but it's still just as magnificent and just as exciting. We're starting to understand our origins. The history that we have recorded is inaccurate. It's been suppressed from us. We are now discovering that the time-space continuum is different, that religion is different, and opening us up to a whole new reality, right? So your son is part of a species, a highly evolved, newly reactivated species that operates on this multidimensional plane of existence.
I believe that. Again, it's hard to sometimes prove it, but I think the test records show it. And if he's my son, and where we can't do what he has the ability to do, it had to have come from somewhere. And when we look back and we remember something very genetic and very personal, and something that we know to be medical, or based on a medical type of situation and genetic, and then we see our children being able to excel and have these attributes that just don't compare to anyone else in the family, you have to ask yourself the obvious question, where did it come from? And there's only one place it could really come from. I look back at my grandfather and my mother and his mother's family, and no one else can do anything near like this. So I'm
Thomas, thank you for coming on. I know that you've got a busy schedule today, but this has been really a fascinating conversation. The evolution of species and Good afternoon. This is Debbie West, your host of Lost Knowledge. Today we're talking to Thomas Reed about his extraordinary case with off-world entities that we're going to that was presented to the UN and also has been talked about on almost every major network. And mass media, newspapers have been reporting on this event as well. It's a high-profile case with his father being a well-known politician from Connecticut. Thomas, I wanted to give you a chance in your own words, and I know this might be a painful memory, but it's important in sort of bringing out all of I guess, healing us of the past wounds of what went on during the UFO time period of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and leading up to today, where we need to start a clean slate. What happened to your father? I mean, right at the time where you were presenting the case to the UN, what was the circumstance and what happened there?
Well, the death of my father, or passing of my father, he died on the same day that our case was mentioned or went in support of 33-426 at the UN. But it was 14 years later. It was the same day, but it was quite a while afterward. It was in 2006, actually. It's our case actually got a lot of airplay on WSBS radio in September and in the fall, on and off, in '69, when it was issued a classification by J. Allen Hynek, which a lot of people say was a Project Blue Book case because of the dates of it, but neither here nor there. It did get picked up and revisited and investigated by Robert Blechman, who was also a Democrat at the time when my father was running the Democratic ticket, and had befriended him. And, of course, there was the same mixers and that sort of thing. Unknown to us that Blechman actually used to work with Hynek. And it was just a really unique connection that you couldn't have asked for a better person to get involved in your case, and this just came out of nowhere. And because of that, and because of the amount of witnesses, and it's going in Historical Society in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and all of that, he really wanted to focus on it. And so after the mention of our case on October 2nd, 1992, Blechman came back with a lot of documents, and a lot of them were stamped with a red seal, October 7th. And my father ended up getting a lot of copies of those, and he's always had the feeling that there was more to this, that there was more of a connection between the local government agencies and even the manufacturing facilities, that there was a connection there, because New England had, and this, between GE back then and Electric Boat and Groton Naval Base and Pratt Whitney and Command Aerospace. I mean, that was all up there in New England. And so at the time, I think my father really had a strong feeling that there was a joint effort of some sort. And after he got these documents back from the UN in 1992, I think it kind of supported what he felt what was a clear picture that there was a united effort, between Off-World and certain government agencies working hand in hand on something. And I argued that for the longest time. I was like, no, this is, it's just Off-World. It is what it is. But then again, it's hard to say, because there were some things that you ask yourself, well, how would that have been? Why the documents alluding to this that we have, that there was a government interaction here. So maybe he was right, maybe he wasn't. However, when he was getting to retire, he said, I think it's about time I put this in writing. And so in 2005, he came to Florida, where I was living at the time, and I was on my way to work. Miami Models is my company in Florida, and I was on my way to work, and I got taken out by a tractor-trailer truck. My car was hit getting off the exit. It was just plowed right into it, like 45 miles an hour by an 18-wheeler, and it left me in really bad shape. And my father, having a winter home, came up to the Palm Beach area, and stayed with me for some time there. And he was off for the Christmas holiday anyway, so he came down, got a tan, and went out on his boat and hung out with me for a little bit, and we kind of recapped the fact that maybe now would be a good time to do that book project. So, yes, it's true. A lot of people have said I feel a little guilt about it because I kind of pushed them into it. I'm sitting there with nothing to do. I thought maybe we could help, get this book going with each other, together, do something as father and son again. And so he agreed to it. And so he went back to Connecticut and mentioned it a few times that he was going to work on this book project. He was going to expose a bunch of things. And my father now had a lot of pull. Okay, he was out of office now, but if he wanted to get on Fox News or he wanted to get in the Hartford Courant or he wanted, he just picked up the phone because he had a way to get his voice heard. Now you look at Robert Blechman. He was also an attorney, a very nice guy, was very much into No Child Left Behind, supporting the teens in the area. And they both were very much like that. My father ended up getting into administration and working as a principal of a school. He loved children. And so did Robert. And so they decided, I think, to work together or feed my father a little bit more information to help him get this book done. And so he goes to school one afternoon. I get a phone call and that my father's in hospital. And, what happened? And it happened to be, he died on the same day, October 2nd. So what happened? My father gets up, goes to school, perfectly healthy, 54 years old, after mentioning and voicing publicly that, he was going to work on this book project and have a pretty hard-hitting book on the subject and open some eyes and that sort of thing. And he had already been published before, so he could get that done very easily. And he had a lot of documents that he was going to talk about. Now, whether or not the spin on it he had or what his feelings were, I can only go by what we talked about over the years, but he had a lot of information and documents and contact with people that I still to this day haven't spoken to, that I know hold a lot of personal and information about the subject. And so I think he was probably, because he was very good friends with the mayor of Bridgeport and because he knew Senator Dodd, been to our house, I'd been to Governor Weiker's mansion for coffee. I think my father pretty much thought he was bulletproof, He had a voice and he had a lot of power behind him. And he was in that New Haven area, that whole Skull and Bones thing. He knew people in that. So I don't think my father thought he could be touched. And he was a nice guy and he didn't exercise any bully type of attitude, but he was pretty sure of himself. And I think if someone told him, don't write it, he was going to write it anyway. And so I think because I almost died, he felt now might be a good time. That, God, I could have lost my son. Maybe it'll give me something to do with Thomas. I pushed him to do it. He advertises it a little bit, makes it known, goes to work perfectly healthy, and is killed on the same day. Now, I met with a doctor. Travis Walton was with me. We were at Dragon Con, actually, up in Atlanta. And I had a doctor meet me in Atlanta who went over his medical reports. Now, the New York Times actually published prematurely, principal of school, dies of Legionnaire's disease. My father didn't die of Legionnaire's disease. My father actually died from a fungus that was in his blood. And the blood that circulated through, heart and everything carried this fungus, and it was very quick-acting fungus. And it put his heart into cardiac shock after the hospital had given him antibiotics. Now, what's interesting about that is that the CDC came in. They found a tainted vial and that sort of thing in his office. His laptop was formatted. C drive was wiped out. He had a Mount Blanc pen in his office that was missing. There were new ceiling tiles in the building of his office there. So somebody had, if something had circulated like a virus or something, they would have, switched the ceiling tiles out. Made perfect sense. People saw people in it. People, partying out back of the school at night. Saw people in the lights in the office. And so, with that said, what happened? This is really what happened to my dad. He contracted some type of fungus in his blood immediately that day. He was perfectly healthy till that day. The fungus, when treated with an antibiotic, the antibiotic kills the good bacteria and the bad. So when my father's head hit that desk and he was rushed to the emergency room, when he got to the hospital, because he was a public figure, they whacked him, with every antibiotic they could to wham, they got to save him, right? There's a memorial for my father. There's a proclamation in our family's honor. There's a bench in the city green dedicated to this man. You save his life, right? So they gave him these antibiotics, and they knew that would probably happen. So when they punched him in both calves of his legs with these antibiotics, it put his heart into cardiac shock because it killed the good bacteria along with the bad, and the fungus took over and shut his heart down. So if you were going to kill someone and have it look like an accident, you disguise the symptom so that they treat it incorrectly, and it flatlines the person. And that's exactly what happened to my father. Now, can I prove it? I can show you the medical records. I'm going to put them in my book when I finally write it. I've got doctors speaking out about it. One of the nurses at the hospital was absolutely floored that after he died, they waited about 2 or 3 hours before they pronounced him dead. So, and they did an autopsy on my father. They cut it, all this stuff. I mean, they tried to, my father's friends and doctors want to know what happened. So this is not something that was accidental. Now, what's really interesting, and I'm very careful not to overstate things about Bletchman and other people because, I have a respect for their family, but Robert Bletchman died shortly after my father, supposedly from a long battle with cancer that I've never heard about until he passed. And then the doctor who actually had gone and written a letter, and this was someone who evaluated the wounds on my brother's chest. He had 2 puncture wounds after the incident, and met with me on numerous occasions. Michael Buckner, right here in Knoxville, who also evaluated my son's abilities. He owned the Knoxville, he was a director of the Knoxville, they tested for ESP, that kind of thing, sensory perception and hypnosis center, and had put in writing and made a final report on his findings with my son's abilities, the wounds on my brother, and he didn't know anything about us or our past until after his report. And after he released his information to us, because we wanted to see what he said, the results of my son's testing, he actually met with a police officer who came to the center with me because they were very interested to see what he thought and if he would speak openly about this at a conference in Murfreesboro, Tennessee in November. We met with him on September 15th, when he agreed to speak at this event about my son's testing and the wounds in my brother's chest, given us the medical reports. By November 12th, that date that he was to speak in Murfreesboro, he was dead. He was actually found on the floor in his condo in Knoxville, Tennessee, a suburb of Knoxville, North Knoxville, on a Friday. And from what I understand from his wife's secretary, he was asphyxiated. So this is somebody else now who has spent, almost a year with our family, medical records, looking over everything, to my father's records as well, who was going public, who found the fungus in his blood along with Dr. Reddy out of Atlanta. There's 2 doctors now that have attested to what happened to my father, and it's right there in black and white on his medical records. It had nothing to do with Legionnaire's disease. It was a fungus in his blood that was very quick acting, and when treated with antibiotics would kill you, would just shut your heart down. And then you got Bletchman, who took our case to the United Nations, passed shortly after my father, which now could have been natural causes, and maybe why Bletchman was pushing my father, or I was pushing my father, and he was leaning on Bletchman to be that support mechanism for him before he passed. But I find that a little peculiar, too, because last I talked to Bletchman, he was perfectly healthy. And so this is just bizarre. And if you want to know one more thing, and I don't ever tell anybody this because of respect for family, but there was an article that came out in the Knoxville newspaper in February 16th, and you can still find it online. My girlfriend died on February 28th. And they said that they found sleeping pills and alcohol in her nightstand, but what was peculiar is she also had a 3-month-old baby. And you don't take sleeping pills when your baby's sleeping in your room with you, and you don't take sleeping pills and drink alcohol when you're breastfeeding. So that didn't make any sense either. And so if you look at all this stuff, it's just, we've had Key Point Government Solutions come to my home and ask me about certain individuals. And I mean, this is a government agency. who put a badge in my face and sat me down on my front steps. And the only reason I could go back in my house was because I told him I had an iron on when I alerted my son to run out and get a picture of him with a cell phone in case something happened to me. And he was in a hot tub, so he ran out in this little friggin' green little bathing suit. And it was in the winter, it was cold, actually. It was, anyway, things just don't add up. You look at this and you say to yourself, there has definitely been a government, something very negative and dark about it, but the experiences themselves weren't. I don't feel that what took place or what happened to us was meant for harm. I think it was meant for good. But it's the dark surrounding piece of this thing that has really troubled us. I don't think I make enough of a point of mentioning that the way we felt about what happened, although it was it changed our viewpoint, on spirituality. And I was an altar boy, and I from a very young age knew that there was so much more than that. And my mother has her bachelor's in ministry, and she still believes in God and that sort of thing, but she also believes that there's a bigger picture now and that we're all part of a creation here. It's not and so it's changed our lives in so many different ways as far as the way we believe and see things. And I don't understand why there has to be this dark piece around it, because I like positive energy. I'm not a dark person, but there's this surrounding or undertow, that's always seems to be around our family that has really ruined, I think, something very magnificent that we were part of. If that makes sense.
So the overall, I mean, that's a horrendous story, and I'll just mention that Nick Redfern, who's a well-known author that lives here in Texas, has also published a book called For Nobody's Eyes Only that talks about many of similar cases of this happening around this the UFO information during the previous time period. I'm hoping that we're all entering into a new phase now, but and that's all hopefully in our past. But the disclosure of this information has been a point of great contention over the years, which sadly has affected so many people in a negative way. But what you're saying, and I think your brother would share this, and your mother and grandmother, who had the direct experience and direct contact in their memory, in their conscious memory, and was able to recount it, shares an experience that talks about the hope of humanity and the opportunity for evolution as spiritual beings. And that's a knowing that you have. That's not something that you can scientifically prove, but the spiritual knowing of it is probably more important than any scientific evidence.
Well, yeah, I think what we really believe and the message that we got from it, if there is one, is that there was something very important about us, or either about people, or there was something very important about us as individuals, and that this was that we were crucial in whatever was taking place and what was in need of us, which I think was I have to believe that there was something genetic, something that involved our DNA and maybe for furthering senses or abilities, or being able to open up and maybe increase the some of the abilities that are in all of us through our children. And there has been so much that I've seen firsthand with regard to my son, and a lot of people have seen this with their children. It's it's not isolated to us, but yeah, there was definitely something positive, I think, that was meant to come out of it and has come out of it. It's only the barbaric, surroundings who like to carry badges and that sort of thing, and seem to take such an interest in people that are under a microscope. I'll tell you one more thing. I don't know if you know this or not, but someone had mentioned this to me, and maybe why one of the reasons we get so much. My lawyer gets run off the road at oncoming traffic and all that kind of stuff. That's, police reports and everything that we've had to have because, it's unbelievable. I had 2 credit cards canceled because I requested it. I never canceled my credit cards, stuff like that. But, the fact that, we have tangibles and we have supporting documentation to some of this stuff. I've always kind of stayed in that realm, and focused on that because I think that's really important. Because as a whole, with the fact that we have some tangibles and police reports and the witnesses and the radio stations and that kind of thing, that's something that this field really, I think, needs, because I think it's something different about our case that other people don't have, maybe because, the political thing with my dad helped with that a lot, of course. But as far as how we really feel about it and what we really think took place and what I think this is about is not something I really talk about much. And one of the reasons I was looking forward to speaking with you today, because this isn't a topic or a direction I normally go in my interviews, but it is. There is something so, the things that have happened around us, there's, anomalies, I guess you could say, that have happened in our home. What I remember as a child with a first account. I think you know about that. I was, and I'll just share this for a moment because it's something I don't talk about much. When I was in the room with my brother when this first happened, the very first experience that I can remember anyway, there was Alien Mysteries actually did a little bit of a piece on it. What didn't do a bad job with it, just light engulfing the room and everything. What I remember from that was that there was a feeling in the room that was just different. My brother was actually, I wasn't kicking the bunk bed like they showed in the TV show. We were frozen because we thought there was something in our room because we saw what looked like an orb, like a hole in the air. And it seemed to have like a moving motion to it. And we were trying to look at it because it was so vivid. We thought it was like a face, was it looking at us? When you're kids, you're like, oh my God, right? And my brother was actually sitting in the corner of his bunk bed on top, like Indian style with the blanket around him. And we saw this orb actually fade out. And when we saw it come out again further to the left, just left of the window. So we thought it was the same one. And then we thought maybe there's more than one. And they're just, and we're trying to make out what this is. And as it came across the closet door, because it actually followed the interior of the room, there was a crack in the door. And I remember staring at that crack in the door thinking, okay, there's something in there, and that's how scared we were. We were like afraid to move because maybe they didn't see us if we stayed still. It was that kind of a creepy feeling. And then there was this vibe. And I've mentioned like 3 moons. Like, when you're out, you can stay out with your friends and you've got a full moon, right? So I'm going to stay out. You got that energy. It's not an anxiety. You just have an energy. And that's what came from this thing, or that night. That's what it felt like 3 full moons. I mean, we were wide. There's no way we were going to sleep. And when it came close off to the left or just past that closet door to the left, it was like almost near the door to come into the bedroom. That's when it was just like everything shifted. It was like I was looking at my room, but I wasn't really there. It was like like a mirrored, like an illusion of the room maybe, or it was like an all-knowing. It was like I myself was looking in on my room, almost like watching a television set. It was really weird. And then I remember this getting hit in the chest, like if someone took not a pillow, but heavier than that, like a solid heavy pebble just hit you in the chest. You actually felt it. And then it was like, if you remember the packing stuff that you have, like when you package, you mail something out, you've got the white popcorn, but the other stuff is like a baggies. You step on it and it pops. If they had big pockets like that and they were white, because I used to mention it was like an ocean wave because it was like a whitewash and it just absorbed you and it like bubbles, but it was almost like perfect, more close to the same type of little oval white pockets all around me. And then I flipped. I felt like I was inverted, like my head was down, but I didn't flip perfectly forward. I flipped off to the right. So I went actually from laying down to feeling like I stood up, boom, get hit, circled by like white pockets. And then I went upside down, off to the right. And next thing I know, I'm no longer in the house. But just before that happened, I just remember seeing the room from a different perspective. It was very, very strange. And it stuck with me my whole life. And the next thing I remember, we were, I remember being up the corner of our property and passing this rock that I had never seen before and this wishbone tree that I I had never been able to go up to this part of the property before. It was past the hay baler, and we were young, and we weren't allowed to ride horses past that, because if we did and we fell off our horse, my mother would never know where we were. So, we had rules. And there was a path up there, and we saw this rock, and we were not alone. We were accompanied by I say other creatures or whatever, I don't know, but I think they were pretty much like a humanoid. And we saw the craft off to the right. It looked like a huge turtle shell. And anyway, to cut through this a little bit, I mean, I don't know, a few days later, a week later, I don't know, I ended up taking my horse up there because I used to see it coming home. I was like looking at the corner of the property all the time, and eventually it just got the better of me, and my mother saddled up my horse one day, and she went inside and went riding, and I took the horse up there, and sure enough, there was that boulder, and there was that tree, and there was where the craft was, and it was, I lowered my head around the mane of the horse, and I broke through these trees, and bang, there's where it was, and it was just like being punched right in the stomach. I mean, it was such a reality check for me, and so that's, I don't know, that's a lot of the stronger or more upfront memory that I have about what happened as a child, and what happened in 1969 added so much to the community, because until then this was just whispered on the lips of my mother. I mean, we had a local diner, the Village Green, and it became the centerpiece really for the town. My mother and grandmother used to, like, way back when, they made a killer French vanilla floats and coffee shakes, and that was what they were kind of popular for, because our Village Green restaurant was pretty much diagonally across from the the elementary school. And so, it was a really small town. I mean, you had the little police department behind us, and Silk's grocery store, and a couple of package stores. I mean, it was a small place, a couple churches, and a gas station, and basically that was it, and post office. And so, being that there was like a green, and our store wasn't on the main road. It was like you cut inward, and there was a green in between the parking lot and the road. So that kind of became a hangout for kids, and they'd bring their bikes and line the bikes up out front of our store. And we would talk about it at our restaurant, because that was when our friends used to come in the morning. What's going on, Nancy? And there was always that rude table of four that would, start to get rude with her while she cooked her breakfast over that oven, and on our way to school, because we used to go in there, eat, then, ride our bikes over to school. And so after 69, everything changed. I mean, it became very hard for my mother. You had those that would barricade the front door and, make fun of her. She was single at the time. A lot of people don't know that either. My mother didn't get remarried again until the early 70s, 74, I think. So at this point, she was kind of just her and my grandmother were kind of doing their best to, inform the more ignorant, and so that kind of got divided. The town really kind of split. You had the people that supported my mother and were good to her, and you had the ones that, found humor in making fun of somebody. And
so what happened in 69? Was that with the car with your mother and grandmother?
Yeah, that was with the car, and what went on WSBS radio, what ended up getting classified with Hynek, and in a lot of ways, I think, has connections to Project Blue Book that, Bletchman found so important, because until then it was really just us telling the story, or telling what happened and trying to relate our history to it. And it wasn't until so many other people saw it that I think, those who wanted to believe my family and believe us started to really make a stand for what happened, and really came to my mother's, had my mother's back, and my grandmother actually ran the store more than my mother did. So, she was having a tough time, but it ended up getting to the point where we just had to move. I mean, I hate to say it, but it broke my mother's heart. We had 13 horses and 80 acres of property and a store, and for my mother to make that decision, to give all that up. I mean, I still to this day, I see it broke her heart, but anyway, I mean, that's the part of it that is unpleasant and has a tough memory. As far as what really happened, I'm glad it did. And
so do you think that sharing your story can help other people who have had similar experiences come out and avoid the ridicule, the public humiliation, the treatment from the media, can we all come out in open dialogue and share communication that we've had with any off-world entities, whether they're the orbs that are appearing to our children, whether they're, whatever cosmic connections we've had, and maybe push the government into disclosure too, so that as we have this shared experience of a multidimensional cosmic culture reality that we're merging into, that we can do it in open and free dialogue without the experience that you went through.
Well, these days I think it's obvious we're not alone. It was much tougher in the 60s and even the 80s. At the time in the 80s and early 90s when this happened, we had Star Wars and SETI was launching their new microwavable technology and there was an interest in it. So I think that was part of why our case went when it did, or to the UN and it discussed back then because there was a lot of interest. But I also think that it was much more closed-minded back then at the same time outside of certain interest groups and budgets and that sort of thing. Now I think people like you and a lot of others who were not as blind anymore. We're starting to realize that, we aren't alone, and therefore those who might have been on the cusp or not sure which direction to go in or more hesitant to speak out, I think, are starting to find that we're much more informed, and we're seeing things that mainstream news, planets and galaxies and life and meteors that have, coming back with certain bacteria and things on it, or that we're seeing that we are not, there's proof that we're not alone. And I think that is all people needed to say, okay, I'm leaning more in this direction now. And I think because of that, we're seeing a swing in the mentality. But I think that it's a slow turn. But with regard to our government, I don't think they'll ever disclose anything. Are you kidding me? We can't get a birth certificate from our president. You're going to expose the biggest secret in humanity. When in fact, you look at this thing from a business standpoint. You want to know what's going on? Follow the money, right? We're mining for gold. We're going to be mining for gold on meteors and that sort of thing. I mean, we're setting ourselves up for space stations for a reason. We're not looking for God. We're looking for other life, and we're looking to how we can capitalize on something outside our own, planet now. So here we are, okay, what do we do? And, we're sending rovers to Mars, and we're, trying to extract this, and we're doing what I think was what was done with Earth a long time ago. I mean, I think I mentioned this before. Earth is like the Ark. Earth has all these vast amount of species and birds and everything after 7 extinctions. I mean, this Earth has been like a Utranium, right, for life, and it's no secret they didn't all come from here. I mean, we're not blind anymore. But again, you look at our U.S. government. What do they think? What do they care about? The first one to back engineer something, or to be able to find a way to financially get gain, financial gain from all this. That's what they're after. If they relinquish that and say, okay, yes, we have this technology, we found this, all these private parties and private groups are going to want to, let's see it. What can I do? How can I get involved in it? When if they keep it to themselves and they find a way to back engineer any technology, the first one out of the gun is going to make the money. The first one out of the gun is going to have the technology, and that's what I think this is about. It's about how do we capitalize on what we have, keep it a secret, we'll you distract people with this. I mean, every time something happens, right, there's a distraction,
When you went on the spaceship and met with the beings, did they communicate anything to you telepathically that you can remember?
I just remember what I believed was a name, Grog, which sounds crazy, but that's all I remember. And
probably to them, Thomas sounds crazy.
Yeah, right. And it's certainly the way I spell it. No, I just remember that we felt important, that we felt, that we were there for a reason. It wasn't, it didn't seem to be by accident, although if you research this, you'll find that O-negative blood for the longest time was the only blood tracked by the U.S. government. So when we were born, here's another thing. When we were born, we were already in the system with the U.S. government because O-negative blood is the only blood that's universal. Therefore, back during the years of Vietnam and all that, it was tracked by the U.S. government because we were the universal donor. So theoretically, the government would have already known we were living on that farm. And if there was an interest in O-negative blood, bingo, we're kids, we're 5 years old. I mean, it's just, some things are just, so obvious. But
Thomas, I got a couple of questions, if I may, and
yeah.
they may not be connected with each other. One, looking back on it now, do you think there was a little bit of an effort to discredit your mother during that time that could have been brought into the area? And two, your son has special gifts. Does he have, or you have the ability to get information on the potential of how this may move forward into the future, what you know?
Two-part. My son, yeah, we have his testing results in black and white on several different, from his elementary school to his grammar, school to third-party testing. So my son's abilities are or aptitudes and what he's been able to do, where it says in black and white from a testing facility that there was a form of remote viewing that he scored very high on. Now, very perceptive about those people at the restaurant. Yeah, I think that there probably was people in there that were early on that were there to make life miserable, maybe. This is a very quaint Norman Rockwell town. Sheffield and Great Barrington, very upscale too. I mean, the Searles Castle is in Great Barrington. Norman Rockwell lived maybe 10 miles outside where we did. So it wasn't, it was made up of a lot of New Yorkers. A lot of wealthy New Yorkers moved there. It was like a place to have a little town away from, home away from the city. And it was like a little Boca Raton. I mean, it wasn't like really ignorant people. So when my mother had this little restaurant, which, really, if nothing more, was just to be a little family local place. I mean, people were nice there. I mean, it was a very nice, supportive New England town. And after she started talking about this, it just became like a little bit of a frenzy. It became rude, and people were coming in that, I don't think a lot of the people that gave her a hard time were regulars, so you have to ask yourself, because a lot of the regulars came to her aid, so you might be onto something there. I think there probably was, right from the start, I wouldn't say to discredit her, but almost to, make light of it or give her a hard enough time that she would just stop talking about it. And it wasn't until, a couple of years later when the mass sighting was seen that, suddenly she, that's when the town really got divided, So, but yeah, you're right. I think that there was probably a purpose to the rude remarks and shutting that restaurant down for us.
Didn't your grandmother also at some point tell you that she felt she had contact?
Oh yeah, she was with us. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In '69, our whole family was involved in that event, and this is usually what I spend more time on is what happened in '69. But yeah, when the car stopped and came off to the right side of the road, I mean, it was a dead silence. I talk about it was like driving over eggshells. The car, you hear all the popping and crunching from the stones, and you hear little tings on the gas tank, and it was just dead silent. And then bang, this eruption of crickets, and the next thing we know, we're all separated, and I'm in this large like bay area, this is what's so different about the other experiences. The two that we only had three really in a 5-year period down in the Berkshires, and that's always been sensationalized too. That all these lifelong. No, we had three. we had a farm, we had a rural area property, and there were 3 accounts of UFOs. The first 2 were seen only by a couple people, and our family got involved in that. And then in '69, everyone saw it. Basically, the whole town knew about it. It went on the radio, for God's sakes. People were calling up. I mean, it was, it was just crazy how the talk and the kids sketching the stuff in school. I mean, it was no secret anymore. And my grandmother was involved in that one. And when we went and into this, or what I remember seeing is a huge bay, almost like a hangar at an airport, for where the house a plane. I mean, it was that big. It was dark. And I was taken out that room, and I was taken out a hallway off to the right, and then that teed off again, and it wasn't rounded and smooth turning like the ones in what I saw in '66 and '67, those 2 other years. It was very soft and round and white and bright, and this was very elementary or industrial by design. And I look back now and I say there's no way this was the same type of thing. Some people say, well, it was a mothership, or some people want to allude to the fact that it was an underground base or whatever. I don't know where I was. I only saw it from the inside, but it did not look super high tech to me. It was very industrial. And what I mean by that is when I went into this room that I was taken to, it bowed inward like a coffee can would. It was bowed way inward, and there were 2 pockets on each side, the left and the right. And there was a place for me to sit or lay. It was like a table thing that came out of the ground, I guess. I was low. I mean, I don't remember jumping up on it. I remember just sliding back on it. So it was either adjustable or it was low to the ground. No one helped me get up there, and I was only 9 at the time. And this thing came out of the, well, first I ran out into this. First, when I saw this, I don't know what you'd call it. It looked like a bug or an insect. It was very stick-like. At that point, I had gone out the right side of this room, and when I came out into this area, it was almost like a huge circle with 3 hallways that joined it. The 2 to the right, it was like a Y, and the 2 to the right were wide, but maybe like a 2-lane highway. So the 2 off to the right were about the distance of 2 car lengths, and the one to the left was probably twice that. So if you were to look at this from like an aerial view, it'd be like the 2 top pieces of the Y came into this rounded circle and then both filtered out, almost like they both were meant to filter a lot of traffic. And that is why the room bowed inward, because the hallways on the outside bowed outward, so the room bowed inward. And so I got to see that when I came out there, but it was huge. It was like running into an auditorium or it was just big. I mean, I was young, so it may have been smaller than I remember it, but it was a big area, and it was very white, had markings on the floor like I don't know what they were. I just know there was something on the floor, like maybe gray swirls or marks or lines. I don't know. There was something on the floor, and I got taken back into the room, sat on this table, then I was laid down, and this apparatus lowered over me like I don't know. It looked like very industrial. It was very there were a lot of like browns and gold tints to things, almost like it wasn't like that shiny chrome everyone references. There was a lot of browns associated with what happened here. And,
could you speak?
Could I speak?
Mm-hmm. Could you ask them questions?
I don't remember asking anything. I remember laying there and having this thing come over me, and there were 2 at the bottom of this table that I was on. There was one behind me. I felt bumps to my head. And the other thing, too, is whenever I went anywhere prior to this day they were always on my left. And this time was the first time there were actually individuals to my right. And it was just something I remembered. When this thing came over me now, to get back to this thing, I thought in a way maybe it was to hold me in place. I'm thinking because I ran, right? So that would only make sense to me. And I'm always trying to come up with reasons for what happened, to justify and try to make sense of things. My father being a lawyer and everything, we're trying to always make sense of everything, and sometimes you just can't. But it didn't hold me tightly. It was I could have slid right out of the thing if I wanted to, but I didn't, and I don't know why. Maybe I was just scared and I stayed there because I didn't want to, maybe I was afraid of something if I did try to get away again. But I could this thing was so high off my chest that you could stick a loaf of bread between me and the thing. You know, it was almost like an MRI machine would stay off you like that, or a tanning bed. It was kind of similar to that, maybe not quite as high as that, but I could see my feet, I could see my pants, I could see my body, and I don't know how long I was there, but it wasn't too much longer that these packets got put on me that looked like raisins, but packets, and then I remember being out and being returned to that. I was back in that holding area, and then I remember coming to in the back left seat of the station wagon, and now my mother, who had been driving, was in the passenger seat. My grandmother, that was in the passenger seat, was now in the middle of the road, because when she got back to the car, nobody else, she was the only one, she came to first. That's the way to word it. And she drove the car to Silk's store. And I was the second one to come out of whatever this was, whether it was an anesthesia, who knows what it was, to see her in the middle of the road, or the middle of the green. It was like a side street, like just right next to our store, actually, our restaurant. And she was going into Silk's. And so I got out and ran up to get to her, and she walked by the clerk that was in there on the right side, and had got tangled in some bikes and strollers and carts, and the one thing I think was kind of disturbing to me was that she started to push this baby carriage as if there was a baby in it. She put her hands on it and kind of rocked it, and I was trying to grab her hand, and there was a connection there to children. Normally I wouldn't have moved so strongly to it, but there was something there that, and I think she was kind of embarrassed to talk about what happened to her, because she was probably the most affected that day. My brother too. My brother was out longer than anyone else. I think he was the last one to come out of it. Yeah, he was actually. My grandmother first, me, and my mother actually ended up driving home from there, I believe. And so my brother had his head on my leg. I mean, he was like out of it when we first came to. That's where his head was. So here we are. We're back in the car in different positions, and it seemed more barbaric. It seemed very combative. It was very orchestrated. It was colder than what we remember in '66 and '67. It was bigger. It didn't look as modern. So who's to say what really happened there or where we were?
Did your grandmother ever say that she was witness to, a race of hybrid beings or hybrid children?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, we all did.
So they showed you these other children that they were developing?
No, we never saw anything like that. No, but there was definitely, if you were to, like my mother remembers her laying at one point and having her lower torso, is the way she words it, manipulated, while she felt like she was confined to like a mannequin. She could move her hands and move her feet and was very aware of what was happening, but it was almost as if her body was just like in a position where she could not control it herself, that it was being handled by others, and it was being twisted. And my grandmother, with the baby carriage, I think there was definitely a connection to the two of them and children. And
right. I mean, the whole program, obviously there's parts of it that can be extremely alarming and extremely almost painful and shocking, and I think if we could have more open communication about this in a forthright way, that we could all sort of decide what, maybe from the United Nations perspective or whatever, what we allow as a species in terms of, intergalactic, interactions. Until we acknowledge that these things are real and that what's happening is true, and that we discern it to be the reality, then we can't operate from the standpoint of we're going to develop ways to have this interaction and this exchange so that everybody can have a peaceful experience. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. and I don't think this was meant to be anything but that, but at the same time, I do think that we are, I may agree with you, I may not, on one aspect of that. I'm not sure that this is really solely for our benefit. I think that this is something that is a need. I think this is something that has gone on too long, and because of what we've become, and because of the limited abilities that we're able to exercise, although we're able to utilize, we just haven't been able to, many of us haven't been able to get or figure out how to do that, for lack of a better word. In other words, between our DNA and our brains and the little bit of ability that we use, it's almost like we've had a governor put on us. And because our governor has been so, limited us in so many ways, that I think we're starting to, some of us now are starting to find and be able to access more of what we are able to use.
Thomas Reed, this has been an exciting, wonderful interview. Thank you for being so honest and for giving your insight into this experience and what it means to us as a species as we now learn to evolve into a higher level of consciousness.
Thanks, Debbie.
To perceive that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for...
Good night, Debbie.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Mike. Good talking to you.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Hi everybody, it's me, The Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, The Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.